Hello and welcome to episode 2 of season 4 of the Datum podcast. Ravi, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, thank you. I'm doing very well. It's been a fun week for the City Football Group. I think the Mumbai FC won the league a couple of weeks ago, and then the Shield most recently. So that's been fun to be part of that journey, and
Right.
fully deserved. I mean, I thought there was a moment where they were going to lose it, but that's good. And of course, lots of football going on, so keeping very busy. How about yourself?
Good. Busy. I'm not sure what with. Busy mostly. I think I've done quite a bit of training this last week, so I think you always feel more busy than you actually are. A lot of the trainings have taken sort of half-day formats because obviously no one wants to be online all day in a Zoom session or a
Zoom
Teams
fatigue.
session. Exactly. Although one funny thing, the teams, the people I was training today are all using Teams. And they all had the same virtual background of a room in an office. And for 1 minute, I had this sort of uncanny valley thing where I was like, are you all in the same place? And I just couldn't quite place it. Then I realized it's one of these virtual backgrounds and they're all actually, in different places. So yeah, I was able to. It's kind of funny, but yeah.
How are you finding training? Do you get training fatigue if you're doing back to back? Like, I think that's obviously a part of the job that I used to have with the Information Lab, but I do less so and more on a ad hoc
training
basis.
Fatigue. Yeah, training fatigue is real. Like, there's a balance, and this sounds like a strange thing, but if you train the same thing every day, you don't become a better trainer of it. You progressively become worse. So you always have to space out training with application. So you shouldn't be training something that you haven't done yourself recently, essentially, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so the fatigue aspect comes from, I think if you load up too many training sessions back to back, then yeah, of course, you don't ever get a chance to step away and use the product and therefore have that excitement of using it, which is what you're supposed to convey when you're training, right? You need to sort of train that out. So yeah, no, definitely a thing. You have to watch out for it. And just like anything, actually, too much of anything can be a bad thing. So yeah.
Cool. So what are we going to talk about today? I think we're going to try and focus on some topics rather than the broad chat we had last time.
Oh, yes. Well, try and focus on 6 topics, yeah?
Rule of 6. Rule of 6.
Yeah, exactly. So non-fungible tokens, that's going to come in. NFTs, WTFs, whatever they are. We're also going to talk a bit about Snowflake because I know Snowflake has been popping up in a lot of places. We've seen a few colleagues do some career moves. Actually, the person who taught me how to train Tableau left Tableau to go join Snowflake as a trainer there 2 years ago. And at the time, I was like, oh, bold move. But now, maybe just read the situation very early.
David Spezia, another friend of the Tableau world, has been in Snowflake for a couple of years now.
Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to talk a bit about Snowflake. I also touch on AWS because Snowflake is built on the AWS infrastructure as well as Azure and Google Cloud platforms. So it's very cloud native. And that's an interesting sort of discussion to have because, of course, the pricing model needs to take those platforms' pricing models into account. Then, of course, Ravi, you wanted to touch a bit on Microsoft and the aggregators in general. Right?
Absolutely. I think that it's an interesting trend. I think we've touched on a couple of those trends in previous podcasts, but digging a bit deeper into, why is it that Excel is still a market leader in data visualization? I think I saw someone scribble the dot into Gartner, right, as a market leader.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult to really get into these topics without having context. Something I'm actually proactively going to do this year is learn Power BI because I feel like for too long I've sat on the sidelines and watched other people sort of tell me what's good and bad about it. And I think as this discussion starts to happen, and I think as we're going to see more and more customers evaluate it because yes, it might not be a better product. It's definitely cheaper though, depending on how you look at it. And in some worlds, that is just more important if you think companies already have investment in the Microsoft infrastructure. So when they say cheaper, they mean they don't have to pay an additional outlay for the same analytical capabilities. So
there's a great stepping stone analogy here, right? In terms of like there's levels to all of this stuff. I think when we used to, when I was at the Information Lab, we used to talk to customers about, well, what are you talking about when you talk about Tableau? Well, and Tableau versus coding in particular, right? So why would you use something like Tableau versus ggplot in R or Python, right?
Yeah.
Or any of these libraries. And the conversation with the analogy that I think either Tableau came up with or Tom Brown came up with, I don't know where this originated from, but was old school BI platforms. You think of it as the camera studio, right? You're going there to take a picture. There's a photographer there that's trained in taking pictures in the studio. The lighting's there, but it's cumbersome to get to. And you can only really take one picture, which is in that studio, in that scenario, right? And you get what you came for. That's what you get, right? And this is old school BI. And then sort of coding, we almost talk about as, if I'm sitting here with my amateur setup, you've got your DSLR, you've got your recording studio level set up with your soundproofing and whatnot, right? So like that is for the purpose, right? You've invested in, you've learned about all the different things you need to consider when working and taking that picture, or in your case, recording those videos. And that's coding, right? You invest in understanding code, and you don't get that instant gratification, but you have the skill set to develop and understand what's done. And then in the middle of it is Tableau, which is your iPhone or your Android device, because you pick it up, that does the heavy lifting, but you can just point and click and you have unlimited goes because it's iterative, and it's not like a disposable camera. You've got credits. And disposable cameras are a nice segue when we talk about Snowflake, because they do have credits, right? But yeah, so I always think of Tableau as that, and then Power BI is almost, it does sit in that middle space. I think it is that ability, and because it's familiar and it's Microsoft. That's the benefit for it. But we can dig into that a bit more, and I think I'm looking forward to seeing you learn Power BI and get into that in a bit more detail, and almost give your hopefully objective opinion on that.
Yeah, of course. Like there's two pieces of software I will start doing videos on is Snowflake and Power BI. I'm very much going to take Power BI as a learner, because I think it's all too easy being, I make videos helping people learn Tableau, but I think there's also value in making videos showing people how you go about learning something new, right? And Snowflake and Power BI are two great opportunities to do that. One, because it's a direct competitor of something I do every day, and another one because it's a perfect complement of something I do every day. So you get to see sort of both sides of that picture. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that.
And also taking it from like a non-compete role, right?
Yeah.
And I think, if you're comparing day to day from the stuff you're doing at the Information Lab, you are taking that compete angle, right? You are saying like, well, it's better. It's not taking it objectively as well. If I'm a brand new learner, I've never used BI tools before.
Correct. Yeah. I think the interesting thing and the interesting opportunity is just to, I think I have that bias built in anyway, right? So
of course,
the way to unbuild that bias is to start using the thing that is making you have that bias, right? So if I have a bias towards Tableau, you sort of balance that off by using something else for a bit more, so that you sort of restore the natural levels of balance in terms of your perspective. So anyway, we'll get into it.
Yeah, and speaking of someone who's spent the last 5 to 8 months being bad at something, like this parts of my new job, right? Like, Jesus Christ, I don't understand, and I'm sitting here making notes, and in my previous role, right, at the Information Lab, I was able to almost rock up and I'll hop onto that call and explain Tableau from scratch.
You mean wing it, Ravi? Yeah,
exactly.
Don't dance around it.
completely, and I'm happy to wing it because I feel like I have that depth of foundation knowledge. But like now I'm just like, damn, like I need to sit down and think about what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
Because I'm not the expert in this field, and it's new and exciting. I have an angle on it, but I don't have the full picture like people that have worked in this industry for so long have. So
right. Exactly. But let's start with NFTs. Right, what are NFTs, Ravs? You didn't like them when we started this conversation. I brought it up.
I think so. NFTs are non-fungible tokens, right? So non-fungible tokens is this new sort of wave of art collecting via digital now.
What does fungible even mean? I'm gonna.
I think so. Fungible means like something it's a sensory term, right? So you're gonna get a dictionary definition out, but from my knowledge, and I could be completely wrong, but it's a sensory term for something that you can touch and feel, and it's like real, right? And
replacement, yeah.
So a non-fungible token is something that's not replaceable, and it's also not like physical, right? It's basically a certification. So the nice point of reference here is NyanCat. So NyanCat is a meme from this video this is when like YouTube was wholesome, and it was full of like all this content where it's people doing like keyboard cat, if you remember keyboard cat, peanut butter jelly time, and NyanCat was around that era of the internet. So NyanCat was sold for a couple of thousand, a couple of million. It was basically the first sort of big story of NFT. Someone bought the digital rights to this piece of digital art. And it can be videos, it can be like an image, it can be like a slightly moving digital art thing.
Yeah.
And I think, so how I've seen it is, but it's not the rights to it. You're not buying the rights to it. So someone can still do save as, they can still copy it and screenshot and share it.
Yeah.
So you're not owning the rights, but you're owning the original token to it. Yeah.
You're owning the ownership. It sounds weird, right?
Exactly. So for me, it's, and the thing when you start seeing things like this go for obscene prices via Ethereum or Bitcoin is, this is definitely money laundering, right? It's like, but then the flip side is you've got art pieces going for similar amounts of money.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the direct comparison in the real world to this digital world. And Tim, you had something to sort of add to that to try and change my mind.
I always think of these things as, listen, the first aeroplane was obviously not what we were going to use to fly across the Atlantic, right? But it was a plane, right?
Yeah.
And it was the concept and it was the idea. And I sort of think of this as NFTs the same thing. Look, this is not what we're going to use. It's not going to become, Christie's isn't going to go out of business because NFTs have turned up, right? But what
Christie's being the auction branch. Right?
Yes, exactly. But what will happen is we'll take the best bits out of this and we'll turn it into something else. So a really good concept to think of is, imagine NFTs being used more proactively in the creative industries to help add authenticity and traceability and provenance to creative work, which is actually quite hard to do today because, you can see something on Instagram, instantly copy the style, and boom, before you know it, everything has gone off. There's a massive world of creative assets on things like Envato,
DeviantArt back in the day, and these things are sold to. I use some of these creative templates in my video. Imagine if my video had a way of showing to people that, listen, Tim has made this video, but he's used it using these assets. A video which he's recorded himself on his own camera. Here's the cryptography key for that camera, the time and the location. He's used these assets. Here's where they appear. Here's the cryptography key for that. Yeah. And so there's this amazing way of adding provenance to any creative work, which always attributes back to the original author. So if you make this crazy template that ends up in 500 videos, there's a really easy way to demonstrate that and to always be credited for your work wherever that digital work ends up. So credit's a great interesting thing. I mean, in the Tableau community, credit is almost like let's not get into that debate sort of topic, right? Now, it's in the digital world, it's such a big thing, and there is almost like a respect among digital authors about giving credit where credit is due.
Right.
And I think even on like Instagram, filters now give credit to the creators of the filters, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Same with things like TikTok and to an extent YouTube as well, right?
Yeah.
I think when you mentioned that, my thought went back to when we first talked about cryptocurrency and the fact that the idea behind cryptocurrency isn't so much the exchange, right? So we're not, the way that cryptocurrency works currently is based on speculation versus the value against dollars or pounds or whatever currency you're using.
Yeah.
It was never created to be that asset. The reason cryptocurrency was created was to have a total number of existing crypto in the world, right? Like the direct
finite amount.
And the direct comparison people made to it was gold, right? Like there is a finite amount of gold in the world, and that is a fact. But if we think about money and fiat currency, that's there isn't a finite amount of fiat currency, because if you run out of money, you can just print it and devalue the currencies. And again, we can go into the economics of this, but it would be a very different podcast. But fundamentally, if we think about crypto in this sense of, well, suddenly you're able to track every single Bitcoin, and every part of Bitcoin has a code, and you're able to understand that in your crypto wallet. In a similar vein, if every digital art has a code and also a bit of traceability and credit, suddenly this is almost like actually this does make sense. And if we just ignore this weird trend of art trading, and in a similar bit thing, if we ignore Bitcoin booms from the 7,000 range to 30 to 40,000, and Tesla hoarding it to inflate the price again through speculation. I mean, we could also pivot this speculation thing into Wall Street bets.
Exactly. How is it any different?
Exactly.
I was going to say the same, exactly that. And see, the funny thing is, I think we as a society get worried about things like Bitcoin that exaggerate the things about today's world that we don't like, right? Bitcoin has these raging prices that, people just don't understand. It's crazy. I think I think back to when I first heard about Bitcoin, and the price of a Bitcoin was in the hundreds of pounds, right?
Yeah.
And
Max Kaiser was the first person in 2014 that I heard speaking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And the way he pitched it was, this is something that's a security, and think of it as a tangible security, not a means of currency.
Right, exactly.
But someone it turned into cryptocurrency rather than like a crypto thing.
Cryptography, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's funny because in games they actually have this exact concept where you can, in futuristic games, they have this concept that you can cryptographically encode a piece of information digitally, and then when you need to reproduce the physical asset, read that digital piece of information to recreate the digital asset. So a crude example is you go into Mars, you encode all the information you need into like a chip, and then when you get to Mars, you have a 3D printer print out all these things, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you fast forward like hundreds and thousands of years, the 3D printing will happen so fast it just look like you're being instantiated in front of you, right? Yeah. Just like happen instantly, right? And so it's exactly the same thing. And so this need to encode information into a digital ledger is becoming really, really interesting. And also, I think we're also at the point where we're undergoing sort of mass decentralization in lots of different ways, right? So governments, local governments, things like the EU look a little bit archaic now because it's just like, kind of if you'd set it up years ago like the Americans did with their union, then maybe it would have worked. But now, actually, I think, the world is so connected that some of the benefits just don't quite lay out.
I mean, ultimately, the EU was started off as a trading bloc, right? Like, trading is very much depending on currency exchanges and all this stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, if we, going back to NFTs, I think there's an opportunity to make them do some good in a space that hasn't had much innovation recently, especially digital and creative work.
I think the pivot point there is like, if you think about the legal field, this is going to be so important, right? Like if you think about how, imagine if you can use something like an NFT or a blockchain follow, right, to verify documentation and say this is the original copy, and verify like assets within a big case and tag them in such a way so they can't be copied because of the depth of encryption within that asset. Yeah.
But the thing is that for that sort of benefit, you won't see it in our lifetime because everything being created now will need to have that encryption for it to be used in a legal case in 100 years time, and everything to be reliant on that. And also, maybe I'm sort of misstepping the mark here, but weirdly, I think the people who are most likely to innovate in that space are not working in the legal sector,
Absolutely
right?
Not,
for a reason, right? A lot of that innovation is happening in the digital space still because that's the bleeding edge of where it's happening. For something like the law sector to take it up, it would cause a mass disruption actually in terms of the way they do things. And I think even the law sector itself, if you just put cryptography aside, has been undergoing like a really big overhaul in terms of the way it digitizes itself and so on.
For sure.
So there's a bunch of other things.
Like for example, DocuSign is and like a digital signature.
Yeah.
That's verified to an email address and a person.
Yeah.
That's taken a bunch of years to have lawyers trust it.
Yeah.
And B, start using it in a secure manner, because like if anyone has any relatives or friends that work in the legal firm, what they'll tell you is everything's super secure. You can't take certain things off premises. They still use a lot of paper, a lot of wet signatures.
Yeah.
There's so much security around information and the where it goes and where it ends up for good reason. So I think you're right. I think that the first thing will have to be trust and robustness to underlie that, and then we'll start to see eke in probably as usual via startups and smaller law firms, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That can be nimble in this process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it'll happen over time. But anyway, that's NFTs for you. Watch the space. What I did say to a friend of mine is, listen, if you're a creative and you know how to create these things, create one, because if it ever blows up, your thing that you created will be worthwhile purely for being in and amongst the first batch of these things, right? Oh. Because the more and more NFTs that get created, the more valuable it is to own something that was created right at the very beginning, right? There's only going to be a finite amount of those. So if you know how to create one, take something you're not terribly passionate about. Take something, that you like, but you're not passionate about. Turn it into an NFT, see what happens. It's a good way to learn what it is. It's a good way to sort of dabble and get some. I think
just a final point on that. There's an account called Visualize Value.
Yes.
And that guy I'm so impressed by everything like in terms of marketing and vision that he does, because he's so open about exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
So more recently, he's created a bunch of NFTs purely for the reason of, let's see how much my stuff sells for.
Yeah.
Right. Like he created these packs, and you've no idea what's inside the pack, what the pack means, but there's 10 of them. And you use the number 10 because 10 is like, oh, there's 10 of them. And I could be one of 10 people to own these packs.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could have literally nothing in them.
Yeah.
And he's also taken a bunch of his images and GIFs that he's created and just put them there and be like, bid.
Yeah.
And it's like, Jesus Christ. Like,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to see creatives do it. But then I think Jack Butcher's an interesting guy because he's just so open about, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. He's actually he has a following. He's fostered his community very well to the point where
it's quite meta because he's fostered his community by telling you he's fostering a community.
Yeah, exactly. And meanwhile, showing you exactly how he's doing it, and almost inviting you to copy it, but then you just can't.
You just can't.
It's very, very, very good lad. A great Twitter account. I'll put it in the show notes. Jack Butcher. He's a very, very cool guy. I love his stuff. So simple, so beautiful. Good stuff. So the next topic, Snowflake. Oh man. So Snowflake, I have to say, like Ravi, you were preaching Snowflake about 3-4 years ago, and at the time I was just like, I don't get it. And there was even a time where I think we had a little talk from someone from Snowflake.
We were in New Orleans Tableau conference, and you were like,
that's the one.
And I was like, we need to like. And you were like, right, let's go to Snowflake. You've been banging on, but let's chat to the person.
Let's go chat to the person. And I have to say, they did not win me over with their pitch. I just did not get it. And maybe that was then, and it's tightened itself up and stuff like that. Maybe over time.
I don't think it has.
Exactly. I know this is exactly what you're going to say. But maybe it was too early then for this more adoption. Maybe we're more ready for cloud adoption today. But anyway, maybe I'll let you do the honors and describe what Snowflake is.
No, I'm gonna pass that back to you and let you do it, given that you've now seen the light. But
I've seen the light. It doesn't mean I know anything about it.
So the thing that sold me on Snowflake was I think first of all, I think you're absolutely right. I think the reason it's having its moment in the limelight the last 18 months or 2 years is that people are more ready to sort of embrace cloud. And they feel that cloud is more secure. Yeah. 5 years ago, or when I first came across it was like I think 3 years ago, and I was like, this is interesting purely because it was the first instance of something I saw that was just in time, right? As in like it's there if you need it, and we don't need it running all the time. The thing I didn't get was how you query it and how you put it there. Right. And the second thing I didn't really get was, because it was all browser interface, do I need to give my data to someone else to own? Yeah. And that was kind of like, I'm not sure how that works, because in the database world, you're so used to installing onto a server, then seeing it spin up, and then doing the command line, and then you set up the database and ingest it using a management tool. Yeah. And this was taking all of that out, being like, no, don't do that. Just put it in the browser. Like, you don't need to install anything anywhere. Like, it's already there. You just need to tell us where to put it, how you want to put it out. And the thing they were selling before was a star schema, and the fact that it will help you build a star schema in the browser and design that, right? Right. And I think they've sort of pivoted that to really focusing on the fact that it's that just-in-time open-shut case. Like you're only paying for what you use. Yeah. And then B, the fact that it's scalable and allows you to get bigger and smaller as you need to. Now over to you to do the mini sales pitch from your side for what you understand.
Right. So the way I think of it is, listen, Snowflake is a database. It stores your information. Unlike other databases, it doesn't need to be on to store your information. Okay. So the storage cost for storing information that's not doing anything is extremely low. In fact, it's comical to the point where, you don't. Ravi's holding up a hard drive right now. In general terms, it almost costs you nothing to store information on Snowflake compared to a traditional database, because a traditional database has to stay on to keep the information persisted and available to you. Now, the key technology behind it is that it works essentially on a metadata layer, right? So rather than treating your rows as rows and columns, it looks at your information and treats it as metadata, which means the original copy of your data never changes. Everything you do is being applied on a metadata level, not on the actual data, which then allows you to do really, really crazy things, because you can essentially do things like instantiate different versions of the same data. They have this really cool feature called a 90-day history, where you can query a database as if you were looking back in time, because they work on a metadata layer. Now, the thing they do charge you for is for resources. So instead of treating information as a resource to charge, they treat the compute as a resource to charge. So
which makes complete sense, right?
Yeah,
because if you're doing this in house, that's exactly what you're paying for.
Exactly. So let's take me. I have 100,000 rows. I don't need a powerful database to look at that. I don't need a powerful query. So I'll just go on a very small instance. I run my Snowflake instance. In fact, I don't even run my instance. I run my query. And the interesting thing is when I run my query, Snowflake looks at my query and decides how much resource and computing power I need to use. And that's typically measured using a credit system. Okay.
Yeah.
And those credits essentially what you pay for. Now, the funny thing is, let's say I only run one query a day. That's not a very efficient way of using it because fundamentally, the time it takes Snowflake to turn on the resources to use that query, I might as well do a few other things with it. So these credits tend to work efficiently in sort of time blocks. So think of them as 60-second blocks. So if I do like 10 queries in 60 seconds, it's going to cost me roughly the same as doing one query for 1 second in that same minute, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so the optimizations with Snowflake are essentially around how you use it and what kind of questions you're asking and how much power you want to throw at the problem. And that enables analytical teams in really interesting ways because I can give my analytics team a really powerful instance to go look at the same data that my CEO looks at in the morning when he goes and looks at it, but he has his own instance that's never slow, is always on, and will therefore never crash or something like that.
And it's that exact tuning,
right?
That once I dug into it, that's the thing. And as I said, the way that Snowflake was marketing and pitching itself was like around that metadata layer because that is the beauty. Yeah. But if you told someone 3 years ago, 4 years ago, this is when people are moving away towards like relational databases, away from transactional and OLAP and cubes and stuff like that. Like that transition was still happening. And now you're talking about metadata layer in cloud. It's like, well, this is too much to understand. And also you can't really visualize it in a way, right?
It's not easy.
No, and it's interesting because a lot of the compete statements I heard against Snowflake was always that they're just marketing and there's not enough power in the compute. And the thing you realize is, well, actually the marketing works because it's a database, right? And I think the comparison I made to databases is it's like a car or a washing machine. Yeah. Like you want the best one, but you also don't want to change it that often. Right? Like when you put your data in a database, you just want it to be in that one place, and then you just want to tweak and build around it, but you don't want to change that thing, and you don't want it to break. Yeah. So if you then it's assured by, as you say, AWS architecture, you've got this great benefit of the cost model, and you can be flexible. And the just-in-time part is really great because, again, as you say, you can aim different types of databases based on the types of work you're doing. Yeah. Which then means that, some people will find it really fast and some people will find it really slow. You can really be smart and strategic about what you use, but also how you display that information. So it's so good. It's so good to see that Snowflake revolution start to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think it's awesome. I think for analytics, it's particularly powerful because in analytics, we've long struggled with this issue of resource. And too often, too many discussions are based on how powerful is your stack, Are you running on 16, 18, 32 gig, 64 gig? And computing moved on from that. Like when you open your iPhone or when you buy your iPhone, nowhere do they sell you the speed of the phone or the RAM it has. They sell you on the features and the things it does. And
unless you're Samsung.
Exactly. It's a different type of world. But my point here is look, what you really care about is the fact that it does the job that it's supposed to do.
Exactly.
And so when people are comparing Snowflake with databases, they really struggle with the comparison because I think typically they're doing the wrong comparison. The way to compare Snowflake is to assume you're going to use Snowflake 24/7, for a whole year, total up the price, and then compare that to the database that you run, because that's actually the comparison you're making. And then once you've done that, go back in and ask yourself, well, is it possible for me to use this database 24/7? The answer is frankly no, because any one person can only be at work for what is effectively half the year. And so then you just halve your cost, and then you started to talk about the real cost of using something like Snowflake. And on top of that, let's say maybe you're just storing data. It's actually quite common for businesses to store data, but not really know what to do with it just yet. And because it's so expensive to store data, businesses have traditionally gone into the practice of not keeping it because they don't analyze it, so why store it? And so Snowflake really starts to sort of come into play when you think about the world of IoT, where you want to store a bucket load of information. You don't know what you're going to do with it, but you want it ready and hot in case tomorrow someone has an idea, and you don't want to spend months instantiating it, which is what would happen. Typically, you'd store it in S3, and then you'd have to use AWS, or if you store it in Google Cloud Platform or Azure, you have to use their processes and skill sets to get these things in. Snowflake gives you a ready-to-go, hot way of doing that without sort of having to do so much work. So in many ways, it actually, it sounds like the holy grail of databases. People are like, okay, so what's the catch? And the thing is the catch is that you have to change the way you think about the product. That's the big catch. Correct. The catch is that if you're the first, sorry, go for it.
I think that's the reason it took so long to get adopted.
Yeah.
That catch is exactly the reason it took so long.
Yeah, exactly. And the other catch is if you're the first to hit the database in the morning, yes, it's going to take 2 minutes, but the person after you will take 10 seconds, and the person after that, no time, right? And these are sort of small things to realize, because what it's doing in that first 2 minutes is literally firing up as many servers as you're supposed to have. And if that means 1,000, then it's going to take a while.
And the fun thing is it also runs off the same stuff that a normal database does. You've got the stored queries, you've got your views, it does all of those great things already. Like I said, it's good to see and good to hear.
Exactly. So, I'm really optimistic for Snowflake. I worry that it's going to fall over in the same way some things that are very modern and fresh fall over, which is that people spend too much time trying to compare it to the old way of doing things. You see, for me, if you look at Snowflake, I think you have to think about pricing your technology differently. You also have to think about how you evaluate return on investment differently, because the return on investment on Snowflake, to me, well, if you don't use it, well, you're basically measuring the ROI of storing it. So, like, if you literally bought Snowflake and all you did was load data in it, then you sat on it for a year, the only bill you'd get back would be for storage. I think within reason. I think you have an enterprise setup, you do have to pay like a standard fee just to have certain things instantiated. But generally speaking, the return on investment argument flips back on you. And actually, that's quite a scary thing for lots of businesses, right? Imagine telling someone, this will only cost as much as you use it. And people just can't process that in their head. And they're like, but you use it all the time. Well, no, you don't. Do you do queries all the time? No, we just store data. Okay, the storage price is this, the query price is this. And because people don't know and understand what queries really do, it's really sort of scary. But they have a great interface for showing you how much effort a query takes. And when you get into the really big instances, you might get into this worrying world where people are running lots of unoptimized queries, and then you're into this optimization game. And so the next best feature would be for Snowflake to build in a layer that looks at your query and says, that's a stupid query. Let me run this instead and save you some money and throw that back at you as the answer to your first query. Then you're talking.
And that's coming, right? Like,
right, yeah.
This is where the world is going. I think we talked about in the previous podcast, where the world is going towards just assisted work, right? The computer's assisting you to do work. And if you're able to get that level of shortcut within a database, you're flying. It's so good.
Yeah. So Nectar UK runs on Snowflake.
Okay.
So Nectar is a royalty reward scheme that works with lots of supermarkets. It works with eBay, Sainsbury's, I think Argos. Yeah, they're all owned by the same company. Duh. Sainsbury's and Argos all use Nectar points. And the way they use it is obviously when you're using your, buying groceries, they are tracking sort of your spend across all these different things. And that is information they give back to those retailers about the kind of customers they have, what they do, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so it works at scale. It works in lots of different ways. I'm actually going to go to the website now and see, okay, which customers do they have, right? That's a key question. What
and this is while you're doing that, I'm just going to talk about like this is a great pivot to just cloud in general,
right?
Because the promise of cloud is that on Black Friday, Amazon.com or any other retailer can beef up their stack to multiple servers just by clicking the number of like duplicated servers and creating a union within that, and turn them off after that period of business, right? And suddenly you're able to, again, you're paying for what you use, therefore you can scale up and scale down really quickly. And you can do it from your phone because it's in browser. Like it's so much of it is just layered into convenience, security, and scalability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I can't find it easily, like a customer page. Not that it doesn't exist. I'm sure I'm just not familiar with their website. So I could Google Snowflake customers, but I worry I'm going to get hit by partners. Snowflake. Let me just type Snowflake customers. Thousands of success stories, of course. McKesson. Okay, fair enough. McKesson's a huge drug company in the US.
Yeah.
A&D. I don't know what that is. Penguin, Random House, Lionsgate, Cooper, University of Notre Dame, Adobe, Nielsen. Oh, Nielsen, that's an interesting one. They definitely need it. ASICS, Domino's Pizza, Devon, HubSpot, Deliveroo. Interesting Deliveroo, because Deliveroo runs on AWS as well. So it's funny that they're using another partner that runs on top of AWS to deliver some of their capabilities. Capital One, S&P, Square, Blackbird, Rakuten, Overstock, Cisco, Sainsbury's, Logitech, Instacart. It's an absolute blockbuster list. Siemens. Gosh. DoorDash. These are big hitters in the US. Yes. The ticker can't roll fast enough. Micron. Semiconductor company. Yamaha. Office Depot. Is there a company that isn't on here? Emirates, of course.
And thus ends today's ad break on the Datum podcast.
Comcast. Prologis. It's 5 hours later. ICE. Oh, I got back to the beginning. I can see McKesson again. Scripts.
Excellent.
Okay, we've gone through all of them though. Oh no, TUI's come back. TUI Group. There's a different ticker on the bottom now. But anyway, you get the idea. Sonos. Another big hitter here. Come on, 2K Games. I got to see all of these.
We should definitely email all of these companies. But look, we're just giving you all a shout out on the Datum podcast.
What? Who's Rulala? That I have to go look at. Rulala. Oh wow. Okay. Google auto completed it. It's a boutique. Interesting. Okay. Cool. And yeah, Sonos. Yeah, that's everything. We've covered all of them that were on the website. So not a small range of customers. These are huge customers, very, very big customers. I could have just scrolled down and they actually have a list on the page as well. Betfair in the UK as well. Gosh, huge companies. So I'd be interested to see more about this. I think I need to just go and involve myself in the literature and the content that they've already got, because it's clear that lots of people have joined this wagon already.
And hey, this is another great sketch note that you can put out, right? Like what is Snowflake in under 10 minutes?
Yeah. So, if someone said this to me, like, when are you going to do a sketch note that isn't Tableau related? And I reminded them I had actually, because I did some sketch notes for Tableau.
Yeah.
But they made a very good point, actually. And there is a whole world of content out there that I can do that is going to be very, very interesting for this topic. So yeah, definitely something I'll do.
Amazing. I think this is a good pivot point back into the sort of the tangentially related cloud platforms conversation we're going to have. I'm just going to quickly throw in Databricks before we move into that,
right?
Because it moves in quite nicely to that platform. So for you, those of you that don't know, Databricks is sort of this up and coming company. I think they're about to IPO, or they have just recently IPO'd. And the thing I like about Databricks is I had no idea what Spark was. And if you think about Spark, you think about Hadoop. If you think about Hadoop, you're like, there is no good Hadoop cluster. I've never spoken to anyone that's used Hadoop.
Yeah.
That A, can explain what Hadoop is, and B, why it works and if it works at all at an enterprise level. And it seems like this, again, it's like the yellow elephant, and that's what everyone knows about them. Now, Databricks is an interesting company because it sort of pivots into two of the topics we've got left on this pod, which is firstly cloud and sort of the Azure platforms as well as AWS. And secondly, this concept of a deaggregated software.
Right.
So Databricks was born out of Apache Spark, and it's basically a data engineering tool that allows for collaboration and just like can tap into your cloud in a cloud environment, your database environment, bring in ML, and also do things like you can create a notebook that's got some Python in, then pivot into R, then use another language, and you can use a notebook that has all these different languages in the same one to do different functions. And that's the versatility and the power of it. And then from there, you can then deploy it into these automated flows. So I'm a big fan of it. And I think it's one of these ones where it is very much on the, when we talked earlier in this pod about the code element where you've got the bespoke DSLR, the person you invest time. It's definitely one where we have to invest time into it. It's not something that's got that low barrier to entry. But I think the draw for it is that it's one of these deaggregators. Like it's very much a pipe, not and it's a pipe with like you can change the nut to be, you can screw it into many different tools. It can bring stuff in from many places, put into different places. It deploys on Azure. You can deploy it on AWS, and it's such an interesting concept because it's, I think, the first of many of its ilk, where companies have. I'm sort of bleeding into the deaggregator chat, but companies have realized that where a couple of years ago everyone was trying to be that single platform, that all-in-one solution, that the benefit actually is in not being an all-in-one solution, but being really compatible with many.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've gone onto Databricks website and there's a customer I've seen here, which is also on the Snowflake one, which is Nielsen. Like, is there a database that Nielsen doesn't use? Literally, they seem to use everything. And, I don't know, if you've ever worked in fast-moving consumer goods, Nielsen pretty much have most fast-moving consumer goods companies over a barrel because it seems to be the only one that collect data about what happens in stores. Nielsen and Kantar, I'm sure one day they'll merge and then no one will have anything to say. But nonetheless, it's really interesting. These companies with huge data problems do sometimes look like they're just throwing money at lots of different sort of horses because
of course,
anything that solves a small problem for them, they're more than happy to go through the trouble of trying it out because, of course, they don't really face the cost. The clients they charge money do. So, at the end of the day, if their big customers want a certain capability and something like Databricks or Snowflake can really offer that, then they're going to go for it, which is interesting.
And it's completely cloud agnostic, right? And that's the thing. If you've got Azure, you've got AWS, and you've got Google Cloud, right? And talking about these big behemoths is where we get into this concept of, look, if you're not Salesforce, Google Cloud, AWS, or Azure, listen, you're not going to be a platform. Like it's
Salesforce
really
isn't on there. Salesforce isn't on there, and that's Snowflake aren't running on Salesforce, are they? They're running on AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. So I think we give Salesforce too much credit to call it a platform because it's not. It's a walled garden. It's the classic. Ooh. It's a classic, scenario where you think it's a platform, but try leaving it and you find it's impossible. Right? Right? Like it's not a platform because if I was on AWS and I wanted to go to Azure, I can. Right? Yeah. That's why they're cloud agnostic. But if I'm on Salesforce and I want to go to something else, it's very hard.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If you want to go from Salesforce to Azure Dynamics, good luck.
Good luck.
Fair enough. But I think it's still very much the Salesforce is a good example of a full on aggregator. Like we're going to eat you up and take all these companies and pipe all our stuff into it, right? With the pure thing of we are a CRM company,
right, and they run, guess what, on AWS. And so, I've always said I wish AWS bought Tableau because I think that would have been the best place for it. You can even see signs of it now. Like we've got 2021 about to come out, and I can't be more frustrated that half the stuff in there is for Salesforce users who also happen to have a license of Tableau, who also happen to have paid for Einstein Analytics add-on, right? So this is like 4 layers of complexity in there. I need 4 products. I need Tableau,
4 license costs,
Salesforce, I need the Einstein add-on, right? And if I want to really sort of finish it off and make it all amazing, then I also need the data management add-on if I'm going to run it through prep, right? Yep. So I've just bought 4 things, and yet it comes from one company. How does that work?
So it's not a platform then, is it? Because
exactly.
You're not paying for one service.
It's not one thing. And like AWS will send me one bill, and okay, yes, they'll charge me for 100 different products, but the costing and everything just seamless. It just feels like one thing. So anyway, going back to what you're saying, for me, the 3 aggregators are AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. I have to say, Azure and Google Cloud have done a lot of work to meet parity with AWS, because I remember Snowflake 2 years ago, they did not have an option for Azure. They definitely weren't working on Google Cloud yet. And one of the things they said then is that those platforms needed a little bit more maturity to kind of get to the point where they could do what they were doing on AWS. And so you've seen that maturity sort of come through. And now these platforms, stand on their own 2 feet pretty much. You see lots of sort of modern companies, but also established companies deciding to run a really good example I know of is S3 compatible storage, which is a term you might hear. So there's a company in America called Linode. They sell servers, but they have a system called, they call it Linode block storage, and it's S3 compatible, which essentially means if you've written code for AWS storage, you can literally run the same code on Linode and it will work just the same way it worked on AWS without you having to change your code. And that's going to become more apparent across the platform. So it doesn't matter where you run. You just go to the place with the best feature for the task you have at hand.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is where I love Databricks, right? It's the ability to be like, right, I've got some code, but it's not in our, well, we're in our shop, so looks like you have to rebuild that code in Python. It's like, well, no, exactly. No. In this, you can have a notebook with multiple different code lines and then still automate, and then you can collaborate, and then you can share, and then you can deploy. And you can, if it's in Azure, you can then bring it into DevOps, and then you deploy through DevOps and have this cycle of production. And it's really interesting to see that diversion of the different code bases and the different like systems and tools come together. Yeah. And what that means to the everyday analytics user is suddenly you don't have to be a full stack developer. You just need to be a specialist in what you want to specialize in. Yeah. And then find a company that's using the tools that allow you to be flexible in that deployment and has that almost diversity of skill sets in a team that you're working in.
Yeah, exactly. What I'm interested to see over the next, say, 3 years is like I always think that we're in this sort of phase of transition with all these platforms, right? And what I want to see is where everything settles. A few years ago, you had this sort of disruption. Tableau was starting to face competition from Power BI. And what happened over the last 4 years is that Tableau cemented itself as best in class. I think, in my opinion, Tableau and Power BI cemented themselves as the market leaders. Click basically disappeared off the face of the earth. Yeah. And, when you do analytics, there's just two tools. Okay, there's other tools which you might go down. ThoughtSport, Looker, all these things. But those are niche players, as the Gartner report likes to call them. Yeah. Backhanded compliments, in my view. So what I'm curious to see is, listen, okay, Salesforce and Tableau, where are they going to land? Where is, are they going to drop the Tableau moniker? And where is the Salesforce platform going to land as an analytics player? Where is the database offering coming from? Because Salesforce has this wonderful CRM system, which is great. But what they don't have analytically is the ability to take that data elsewhere and do other things with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be instantiated into a database. It doesn't matter how much you have a nice interface. At the end of the day, fundamentally, in every enterprise, if you want to work with other data sets, you're going to need to put that data somewhere. And I don't think Tableau is going to answer that question. I don't think Tableau is the part of Salesforce that goes and builds a database.
So here's my challenge, right? What happens if Hyper, do you remember Hyper, that German little company that we talked about in possibly our driest episode to date. What if they spin that out as a standalone database? How far away is that from competing to our new favorite database, Snowflake?
Tableau's too distracted competing with Power BI to build Hyper, in my opinion, as a database. I like, if we look at where the focus is at the moment, if that was actually going to happen, it would have happened by now. We would have seen elements of it. We'd see elements of it in other places. In my opinion, that is almost a separate company that you buy. You give the IP to them as Salesforce, and you say, right, Tableau have this great IP. It's called Hyper. We want you to take it to the next level. So go buy another database company that's small, is hungry, Snowflake, and go make it do something awesome with Hyper, whatever you get, right? And
or flip it on its head and go for the scorned lover in this scenario, Exasol, which was everyone's favorite, everyone's previously favorite database company.
Right.
Like suddenly Exasol is cast to one side. Everyone's talking about Snowflake now. And listen, I'm 100% gonna say that. Well, I sort of discarded Exasol a couple of years ago. In so much as it's hard to set up. It's not the easiest to maintain in terms of compute, and scaling it's not cheap.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of reasons. For some companies, those aren't the things that matter, right? Like, it's weirdly Correct. For some companies, like, doesn't matter how much it costs. We've got bottomless pockets for what we do, and the customer, we don't pay, our clients pay, right?
And the big benefit and the thing that Exasol has over Snowflake and over Hyper is the secret sauce that makes it really, really good.
Yeah.
Right? And that's within the transaction layer of it, of how it computes and ingests data, and then it allows you to query it in batches.
Yeah.
Almost to level of streaming.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the benefit that Exasol has, and it can work with billions of rows, and it's remarkably fast at that scale.
Yeah.
But the world doesn't need a big database anymore. It needs a database that allows you to be flexible.
It's DynamoDB. It's already been answered. It's what Amazon runs on.
Yeah. There we go. And this is it. So like I feel like the acquisition isn't going to be a Snowflake. I think Snowflake is about a couple of years away where they're going to grow and become a behemoth before.
But they have no place. They have no place. They need. I don't think as Snowflake you can solo become a platform.
No, completely. And they should 100% follow the Databricks route of we're going to be deaggregated.
Yeah.
Right. That's the benefit, and because of that is why I'm saying is where I say Databricks and Snowflake is the one and the same in the conversation is that style of company is what you should aspire to be.
Yeah.
And be as big as you can without being bought out.
Yeah.
Another company of this ilk that is currently like similar to Exasol, I believe currently ready to be bought out and sucked in is Alteryx. Yeah. Right? Alteryx is in that position of who's going to buy it, and for me that person is going to be AWS.
Yeah, potentially. The problem is that
I mean, I obviously want Microsoft to given what I'm working with at work, but
the other thing you got to ask yourself, what are you buying with these platforms? If I'm buying Snowflake, I'm buying quite a lot of good things. There's a lot of good, positive things in Snowflake, especially if I'm someone like AWS or someone like that, right? It's in one of the interesting comments I remember hearing about Azure that one of the biggest reasons Azure was growing at one point is because businesses were running Tableau servers on it. So
wow.
Why, as Microsoft, you're getting a piece of the Tableau cake without even having to own the product. So why would you buy it, right? And it's the same thing with Snowflake and these other things. Why would you buy Alteryx, given that what they do is actually not that unique, right? Tableau have just proved that actually you can copy the sentiment of Alteryx very easily, right? And add your own innovation to it. It might not be as good, might not be as powerful, but that's not what matters. It's the sentiment, right, that matters. You just show that you can copy the concept very well. I would argue it's not copied, but you know what I mean. It's exactly the same workflow-esque sort of interface, just done the Tableau way, and therefore it actually has an experience and a user interface to go with it. So I'm just curious, Snowflake, where is it going to land? Where its customers going to want from it? Has it got the chops to fight its own corners against the big database? I'm not sure it does. And therefore it needs some sort of strategic partner at least. It might not be a purchase, but it needs strategic partners. So whether it pallies up with Tableau and all these modern analytical tools and says, yes, Power BI, all these guys, let's go. And then it runs natively in Azure, Google, and AWS. So everyone loves them. Fine. Who knows? See where it goes. But yeah, interesting times. Interesting times ahead. I think what the last thing I'll say on Snowflake is I'm also wondering how this is not everyone buys a database, right?
Yeah.
So Tableau, easy. Tableau public exists. We all build visualizations. We all get it, right? So Snowflake, no, not everyone builds databases. So there's got an inherently smaller captive market of people that can get excited about it, and their trial is great, and you can get stuck in. But what I'd really love them to do is to really capture this enthusiast market. And I say that from a PC building perspective. You can buy a PC as an enthusiast, and what that really means is you understand enough about computers and PCs to want the kind of features that data centers want without the complexity of a data center. So what that means, really powerful multi-core CPU, really powerful logic boards that can do kind of things that you do when you're in a server rack and stuff like that. So I'd love them to go for the enthusiast database admin who has some information about, let's say, their life, or who has a bunch of photos, or I'd really love them to go for that. Someone like me who has lots of quantified self data, needs somewhere to store it, has some metadata for my business or whatever and needs somewhere to store it, and just offer me a really nice way to grab that metadata from wherever it is, Amazon, AWS, Google, and just bring it into their system as like some sort of database. And because it's so cost effective, it actually doesn't cost me that much. So go for that enthusiast market, create their own Tableau public in esque, but obviously
you're spot on. You're spot on. And the benefit is that model that can exist so easily within so many industries where you just create pockets of data sources.
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, look, I'm just going to charge you how much it costs to connect to it.
Yeah. Because you
can either set up as a subscription model, being like monthly, you're going to get this.
Yeah.
And it's an all you can eat, or you charge per transaction. It's so easy to transfer that cost because you get an itemized bill at the end of every month.
Exactly. You can literally see the costs happen as you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so what's really fascinating is that enthusiasm that you build up through that enthusiast market does the marketing for you, which is where Tableau have been very smart over the years.
Correct.
And actually it allows people to prove the value of it in a very small, tangible way without really costing them anything in terms of marketing, and without it really costing anything in terms of businesses making mistakes and failing on it, right? Yeah. And so, I hope that's what they do over the next 3 years. Create sort of a really strong enthusiast market that doesn't require you to have to go in for the trial. I know it's a 30-day trial. It's a pretty forgiving trial, on their pocket. But it's I think there's a more interesting market there with the enthusiasts to say, okay, listen, if you put £100 into this a year, we'll run your database for you and we'll optimize it so you never go over that £100. Let's solve that problem together, right? And then you can use it, and then maybe towards the end of the year, it tells you, hey, you still got 50% of your credits. Let's run some crazy ass, queries on your database. Let's do some fun stuff with it.
It's
ML,
it's such a flexible thing.
Yeah,
it's such a flexible, and it's that flexibility that is the power behind it, right?
Right, so. Exactly. Anyway, I think we better call it there. We've been recording for an hour. I hit record an hour ago, according to this thing over here.
Yeah.
We're going to try and do some interesting things, actually. We're going to try and create videos from these. So what actually happens, what has happened in the past for the last 3 seasons is that we normally go on FaceTime and we talk about it. Mm-hmm. However, in the last few times, FaceTime has failed us and we've been using
miserably.
Signal. And so we're staring at each other on a video call and we're thinking, hey, we've done this before on the live streams. We put these on YouTube. So what if we just, stream these live, or even just recorded them and then put the videos up afterwards? So we're probably going to start doing that. Look out for another YouTube channel. Yes, opening my second one.
Or we can chuck it into your one, and we can tap into your organic fan base.
Datum is its own big thing. We're going to grow it from the ground up. There's always fun doing that. So yeah, we've already got some Datum content on my channel actually, but we'll grow a nice organic channel so people can tune into our 1 hour rambles. And we can sort of get a new audience there. So look out for that. Look out for the Datum Podcast YouTube channel. It actually already exists.
I think it already exists.
Haven't done anything with it though. That's the problem.
I think the last time we used it was possibly for the live stream recording we did.
Exactly. So what I'll probably do is I'll spend a weekend. I'll sit there, re-render all our past episodes, just the MP3s, and then we'll get these things up. So look out for that. And that's it for the show. We'll catch you very soon. Ravi, it's the first time we've recorded not back to back, but within 2 weeks on time. Yeah. In a while, I'll say. It's not the first time, but it's in a while. First time in a while.
Let's see if we can keep a hot streak going.
Exactly.
This is
exactly.
I think we kept this cadence up for 4 consecutive episodes last time.
Right.
I think that's our best streak. So let's see
go
if we can
for the
top
whole
that.
year. Let's go.
Yeah.
GG,
exactly.
as they say.
GG.
Good stuff. Right. We'll catch you in the next episode, guys. Take it easy.
Nice one. Take care, everyone.